What is a game? This is an age-old question that may not look very important, but how do we make or play games if we don't even know what it is? One of the most popular modern views on the definition of a game is the model listed by Jesper Yules, which states that a game should have the following elements. Fixed rules. Basically, the game does not change its rules unless it specifically says that it can change midway. Player effort. If everything you do is correct, then it's just a story. Variable, quantifiable outcomes. If everything you do is linear, then it's not a game at all, because interaction from the player is meaningless. Values associated with each outcome. Basically, you can win or lose, or contribute towards those two outcomes with each decision you make. Player attachment. If the player cares about the game and the outcome. Lastly, the consequences of the activity are optional and negotiable. Now, while this does make sense, with this alone I wouldn't be able to paint the whole picture of what exactly a game is. In Suits Bernard's What is a Game, they describe that the most important element of a game is obedience to the rules. Rules are not all clear-cut. For example, speedrunning can be considered a game, but submitting a tool-assisted speedrun is not considered playing the game of speedrunning. If you don't follow the rules, then by definition you didn't play the game. In their own example, let's say that my goal is to get a ball in the ground. The most efficient way to do this is to dig a hole and put the ball inside the ground. And it's definitely not to dig a hole, walk 400 meters away from it, and then try to put the ball in the hole using a metal rod. If you do this, you play the game of golf instead of doing the task of putting the ball in the ground. Basically, you need to achieve the goal in the prescribed way. Otherwise, you're just performing a task. However, Rowe introduced a new problem in his paper, The Definition of a Game. He introduced the concept of make-believe. After all, you could play make-believe, but is it a game? It's definitely hard to argue that it is indeed a game with all the missing points we need to define a game. If it is not a game, then how does one play make-believe? If it is indeed a game, then would you consider a ritual a game? He then discusses that a game consists of a player with an efficient means to an end. But doesn't this contradict the fact that he said make-believe is a game? There's no means to an end because there is no end. He then states that we must understand that while a game consists of a means to an end, the game itself could be either the means or an end. The way I understand this is like the concept of a recurring function in coding. For example, let's say you built a maze in Minecraft with twists and traps for you and your friends to enjoy. Using all the concepts we know so far, we can understand that a game consists of you and an inefficient means to an end. In this example, your game isn't Minecraft. If Minecraft was your game, then you'd be trying to beat the Ender Dragon. Minecraft is your means, and your end goal is actually your maze. This means that you can create the maze game in other games, but anyway, we already have our inefficient means to an end. In fact, with this said, Minecraft could still be your game while playing this game. Because if you make a whole maze instead of progressing towards your items, you're actually making the inefficient means to an end. Thus, you're playing Minecraft and the game of creating a maze. You can take this example one step further. In that maze game, you could try to create the most efficient route through the maze, which makes it another instance of a game entirely, where your means is the maze and its completion, and your end goal is the most efficient route. Anyway, the point is that Rowe was not disapproving that games are all about means to an end. It's just that games could be the end goal itself, and that's exactly what happens in Play Pretend, where the game is the goal and the means is whatever the players intended to be. Meanwhile, Witten believes in a firm structure of games, with his list of elements containing competition, challenge, exploration, fantasy, goals, interaction, outcomes, people, rules, and safety. Wow, that was a lot to say. However, this already falls into the trap that modern definitions get into. The old definitions are surface level only because if you dive even just one level below the surface, then it gets a lot more complex. Sternos, who wrote The Definition of a Game, a review, also proposes that a game has a definite structure, but also acknowledges the fact that a game can still be a game even if it does not follow this structure. While Sternos provides useful information on what a game is, the study ultimately decides that the definition of a game is still up in the air. There's one last paper I would like to address, one which I personally agree with, and its title is The Science of Casino Blackjack. It's ironic because there are all these studies that try to define what a game is with their entirety, but this one book by Richard Wertheimer, I don't know if I said that correctly. Anyway, this is the one I agree with the most. The book explains that the most basic form of a game is represented by the blowing of a balloon. It presents the single most important element of a game, and that is risk versus reward. How big should I make the balloon so that it can get as big as possible but without making it burst? Werthammer then explains that in a gamble, your only choices are to play, to stop playing, or to not play at all. Whether you reach the end goal or not is entirely dependent on a means that you have absolutely no control over. Meanwhile, in a game, you have control over your means. I agree with his idea that this is the most important element. The ability of a player to display their decision-making abilities is what defines a game over gambles and stories. If all your decisions are correct and some choices are just more efficient than others, then I think it's just a linear story. But don't get me wrong, that's basically what speedrunning is. And that is still very much a game. Albeit not the level I'd like to play on the daily. Meanwhile, if all your decisions are inefficient, then it's just a gamble. The balance in between is what I think makes a good game. For example, imagine if League of Legends was just a 5 versus 0. It's still pretty much a game with an inefficient means to an end goal, but then again, the only fun thing you could do is improve your time on destroying the enemy nexus. However, if the game is a 5v10 where you're always meant to lose, then it's pretty much just a gamble where the house always wins. And the only thing that makes you play is that the chance to win is real, but it's not realistic. Funny thing is, there was actually a game mode that makes it look like this, and it was called Doombots. It was fun, but ultimately it's not League of Legends, and it's just a funny little game mode. There's one last definition from Chris Crawford that some of you might agree with.
Designer Chris Crawford came up with a really cool hierarchy to explain this. To start, Crawford characterizes any kind of interactive entertainment as a plaything. Anything that you interact with to entertain yourself qualifies. But there are also two types of playthings. A plaything without a goal, like a slinky, is a toy. But when there's a goal involved, like trying to get the slinky down the stairs, Crawford calls that a challenge. Now, if you're working to complete this challenge with no other active agent or person involved, it turns out you're working on a puzzle. But when there is some kind of second party involved, then you have a conflict. Okay, we're almost there. Crawford subdivides conflicts into competitions and games. In a competition, the participants don't interact or interfere with each other.
In summary, the definition of a game is still pretty much a player with an inefficient means to an end. However, its elements can also be a game. Expanding on this is nearly impossible because, as simple as it sounds, diving one level deeper spawned all the video games we know today. By trying to differentiate and integrate the definition with puzzles, gambles, and stories and other things, we made statistical optimization games, puzzle games, story-driven games, and other games. Space launches are definitely not video games until we decided that it is. In the end, one could argue that anything could be a game, but if you ended at that, then it's just a plain old lazy convenient way of thinking. I do agree that anything could be a game, but we should also keep the implications in mind. If we're going to agree on that, then we could think of life as a game. True to the definition, life could be a game where your end goal is self-defined and your means is, well, whatever it is. Or it could be the means to achieve something. Or it could also be your whole endpoint as well. And all of these would be correct. I mean, sure, it's definitely the most unbalanced and pay-to-win game out there. And the devs are AFK, so let's try to help each other out and play nice, okay? But what do you think? What is a game for you? Let me know in the comments, and I hope you learned something new. Thanks for watching.